Mr. Secretary, there has been a lot of concern about the volatility of crude oil from the Bakken shale deposits. And in January, the Pipeline and Hazardous Materials Safety Administration issued a safety alert after the explosive accidents at Lac-Mégantic and Castleton, indicated that Bakken crude oil may be more flammable than usual. My constituents are actually very interested in this because Bakken crude is being shipped to the refineries in my home state of Washington. To provide an answer to this, I understand that you have announced expanded sampling and testing of Bakken oil, and I wanted to ask you today when you expect that testing to be finished.
Madam Chairman, the testing is ongoing. I would say to you that we will wrap up our testing as quickly and as expeditiously as we can. In addition to the sampling that PHMSA is undertaking, we have also requested from the oil industry data samples from their own testing. And I'm unfortunately here to deliver the news that we haven't received robust sample from the industry to this point. As you well know, in a situation like this, given the questions about the volatility of the Bakken crude oil, that the more sample we have, the better we can evaluate next steps as it relates to.
And so far, the industry has not been cooperative in providing you that information?
To my knowledge, we have 3 of the oil companies that have provided information. We've requested that we get as much as we possibly can, and that is not a huge amount of sample for us.
Is that slowing down your ability to get us good information?
It is not only slowing down our ability to get you good information, it is also affecting our ability to develop the kind of coordination that we need to have with first responders so that they know exactly what's being moved through their communities.
Okay. Well, assuming you can get this from the industry and you've done your testing, if you find that it is to be at higher risk, would you change how DOT regulates the shipment?
Depending on what we find, we would certainly develop safety measures designed and calibrated to address the particular substances that we have. That is one of the reasons why in our call to action, we worked with the rail industry to do things like reducing speeds and so forth, and on an interim basis as we work to learn more about this material.
Okay. We're going to continue to pursue that line with you. In January, the NTSB issued its report on the Lac-Mégantic accident, and the report raises several issues with the regulation of crude oil shipments by rail. Of particular interest were the board's findings on comprehensive oil spill response plans. Those kinds of plans ensure that carriers have sufficient personnel and equipment that are available to address an emergency. Oil spill response plans are a well-known safety function in the maritime and the pipeline industries. I'm well aware of those. But rail is, for all practical purposes, exempt under current regulations, and I find that very troubling. If all of our other means of prevention fail, we need to make sure that cities like Seattle or anywhere have the resources that they need, and response plans are a very meaningful way to provide FRA oversight and have been proven. So if you could comment today more on your details, Chairman Hersman, on your recommendations to improve spill response for us.
Sure. Chairman Murray, I think that one of the first times I interacted with you was actually out at a field hearing on the Bellingham pipeline accident.
That is correct, 10 years
and
ago.
we know all too well when we have investigated accidents on the marine side, on the pipeline side, that there is an expectation to provide that support. After the Exxon Valdez, through the Oil Spill Pollution Act of 1990, this country realized we had to be prepared for worst-case discharges or worst-case scenarios. It makes absolutely no sense that we don't have a similar expectation when we have, in essence, a moving pipeline when we're talking about unit trains of crude oil or ethanol. In Lac-Mégantic, 1.5 million gallons of crude oil were released. We have got to support our emergency responders in local communities. They can't possibly be prepared for one of these worst-case discharges. We have to have a support structure in place for them, and that is the obligation of the shippers and the transporters to make sure that that happens. They are the best equipped to do that, and they can do that by contracting with resources all along the route so that there is a rapid response. The communities that are along the rights of way deserve it.
Similar to what we do with pipelines.
Absolutely. Pipelines and the marine industry have done this for years, decades, in fact. They know how to do it, and it can be done.
Okay. Mr. Secretary, to get more meaningful spill response plans, would we need legislation, or can you do that on your own with your own authority?
We believe that as we develop a regime of safety, that it would be helpful for our department to work in conjunction with Congress. There will be areas where the agency capabilities are sufficient. There will also invariably be areas where we will need action by Congress. This continues to be an evolving area for us, but we are moving quickly to help move that conversation along.
Okay, we will be working with you on that. Let me move to the tank cars themselves. The DOT 111 is the federal safety standard for tank cars used to ship liquids, including crude oil and ethanol. Unfortunately, has a poor safety record dating back decades, as you indicated, and the NDSB has been pushing for design improvements since 1970s. I think we can all agree the standard needs to be updated, particularly given the dramatic growth in the shipment of hazardous materials like crude oil and ethanol. While the resiliency of the tank car is not the silver bullet of rail safety, it is a community's really last line of defense to prevent a spill. I know the department is working aggressively on a tank car rule, and recently Administrator Quarterman said it would be released soon. Mr. Secretary, can we expect to have that tank car rule issued soon?
Yes.
This spring?
We will work as hard and diligently as we can, and I can assure you that we are not going to wait until 2015 to push this rule out. We are moving as quickly as we possibly can.
And are you planning to address the phasing out of DOT 111 tank cars for the transportation of crude and ethanol?
We agree that the DOT 111 either needs to be improved or phased out. And again, as an ongoing rulemaking process continues, there will be more as that rule is announced.
Secretary Fox, you talked with Senator Johnson about this issue. We're really seeing in my state of the delays. Grain shippers and manufacturers are reporting disruptions due to this congestion. I'm hearing from manufacturers in Snohomish County who don't know if they're going to get the parts they need to get the products that they're developing out. I know the Surface Transportation Board has responsibility, and there's going to be a hearing on this, as was mentioned tomorrow. But I wanted to ask you, as FRA imposes some speed limitations to address safety concerns on crude shipment, it is going to have an impact on other businesses. Are you coordinating your safety oversight with their efforts?
Yes, we are.
So you're talking directly to them?
Yes.
Okay. We will be following up on a lot of the other discussion on this. Obviously, it's very critical to this committee and to all of us that we get the safety issues right. But, Mr. Secretary, I wanted to talk to you while you were here about sexual assault and harassment at the Merchant Marine Academy, and if my colleague will indulge me, I want to take a minute on that. I know it's not within the scope of this hearing, but it is a very serious problem that has got to be addressed. You came before this subcommittee last month. We talked about the very troubling results of the 2009 Sexual Assault and Harassment Survey at the Academy. That year, in 2009, students reported 7 assaults and 22 cases of harassment. Less than half of the faculty and staff surveyed felt that the Academy's senior leadership fostered a climate intolerant of sexual assault. Well, I've just now seen the report for 2011-2012 school year. It is very disturbing. It says during that school year, there were an estimated 25 sexual assaults and an estimated 136 incidents of sexual harassment. That's more than 7 times the total number of harassment cases for all of the military academies combined, and it really is appalling. And almost as troubling is the fact that there is no record of these incidents being reported to academy officials. Clearly, students there lack confidence in their leadership. I am really floored and appalled by these results. I want to know what's going on here and what steps you're taking to change that culture so that faculty and students know that this will not be tolerated.
Senator, I am troubled by these, the report as well. And when we last talked about this, you specifically asked me when the report would be produced, and I promised it to you in 2 weeks, and we met that target. But the statistics and the information is alarming. I would point out that the information that you received covers years prior to the steps that were undertaken to change conditions at the academy. Steps that included hiring a sexual assault prevention and response coordinator, implementing a new campus-wide sexual assault prevention training, upgrading the academy security system, and establishing a 24/7 hotline. There have been many other steps that have been taken, and I will have to tell you that my great hope is that as we get reports in successive years about how these new steps are being taken and received and handled on the campus, that my expectation is that we will see reporting where an incident occurs and also an effective response by the administration. I would also suggest that in the coming weeks that we as a department work to schedule some time with you and other interested members of the committee to meet with Admiral Hellis, who runs the U.S. Merchant Marine Academy. I'd be happy to attend that meeting as well. But I think this is a very serious issue. We take it seriously, and we're going to take steps to get this right.
This has to be a top priority.
Yes.
I don't want to wait a year for another report to come out and things are still happening. And I want you to know this subcommittee is going to do a deeper dive into this matter. And I know I can count on your full cooperation.
Yes,
so
absolutely.
we will be following up on this. Ms. Graff, let me start with you on questions. You have a lot of challenges as the Director of Emergency Management in Seattle. And now this growth of crude oil traffic is one more for you to factor in as you plan for a lot of different events. We're used to seeing energy supplies move by ship and pipeline, but with the growing domestic energy production, we're going to see a lot more of it moving by rail. According to our Washington Department of Ecology, rail shipments of crude through our state increased from very modest levels a few years ago to over 17 million barrels in 2013, and it's expected to triple to 55 million barrels this year. Can you talk to us about what the city of Seattle is doing to prepare for that increase in the crude rail traffic?
Our city council recently passed a resolution signed by Seattle Mayor Ed Murray that has asked our Office of Emergency Management and our Seattle Fire Department to analyze what that impact is, and we would be happy to share the results of that. We've been given until June 20th to take a look. We are kind of at the long end of what your line of questions asked this morning, though, and that is, unless the actual product itself can be properly analyzed and therefore regulated and therefore shared with responders, we're still waiting for those answers as well.
So you need the Department of Transportation to get that information as well?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Secondly, I'd say it's one thing to prepare, and I think the Chief and I were talking about this earlier, it's one thing to prepare for 95% of the calls that a community goes on. And we have adequate emergency response plans for most of the things that we deal with on a frequent basis, winter storms, et cetera. But as we increase the frequency of such a high hazard that's carried in these cars with the results that we've seen and heard about today, it's another to expect local departments, whether rural or urban, to have the kinds of materials necessarily, the foam to deal adequately with a fire, the public warning systems adequate to talk with members of your community in danger. There's an imbalance when we increase the hazard, but we don't increase the ability of the local community to deal with that hazard. Those are some of the things that we'll be studying, providing a report to our mayor. We'd be happy to share it with this committee.
Okay, good. I would really like you to do that. I appreciate that. You heard the first panel this morning. There's a debate about whether the potential risks of these unit trains of oil demand changes in how we approach oil spill response plans for the rail industry. The NTSB argues that rail carriers would be better prepared to mitigate damage if they had comprehensive oil spill response plans in place to ensure that the appropriate personnel and equipment are available. And as we have seen in some of these recent rail accidents, emergency response activities that have fallen on local communities are often not equipped for these kinds of disasters, I'm assuming particularly in rural communities. I wanted to ask you, based on your experience, do you think there should be more robust spill response mandate on rail carriers?
I do, and I was in the community of Bellevue when the Whatcom County incident happened with Olympic BP. And we had infrequent contact with even pipeline carriers before that incident. And it's unfortunate that we have to wait until after an incident that we wind up disclosing more information. A comprehensive emergency plan means that we've all talked with each other, and we've discussed all the product, all the hazards, all the response capabilities, and how we can fill any gaps. We can't adequately measure gaps unless we are comprehensive in our planning. We are delighted to come to the table and do that with a regular basis with many of our other community members, the American Red Cross, the Coast Guard, the Navy, our colleges and universities. We'd welcome that opportunity to look at a truly comprehensive plan in partnership with the railroads.
Okay. I understand that railroad companies have conducted a number of hazmat safety training classes throughout our state. Do you know whether Seattle has received training and equipment resources from the railroads that are operating in our
I know
state?
that the Seattle Fire Department has received training. I'm not clear as to whether they have received any equipment. I'd be happy to follow up and get back.
Okay, if you could find that out. I know that Class 1 railroads have committed to spending $5 million to develop a specialized crude by rail training program for our local emergency responders at the Transportation Technology Center that's actually in Pueblo, Colorado. I know Seattle firefighters have gone through hazardous material training there already. Is that training easy to access? Have our Seattle emergency responders found these to be useful?
Since the program at Pueblo is grant funded, it is easy to access. It is not easy to pay for the backfill and overtime cost of the firefighters that we send. So we have to budget carefully to send the kind of people that we hope learn the material, come back and act as trainers to the remainder of the department.
Okay, thank you. Chief Pellerin, your testimony was very moving. I can't imagine what it was like for you to get that call and for your volunteer fire department to respond to that. I wanted to ask you, during your response at that incident, how helpful was the local railroad? Did they provide any assistance with the actual emergency effort? Did they clarify what product was being loaded into those cars? Anything like that?
Madam Chairman, as of 2 weeks ago, we learned the cars were placarded incorrectly and identified as the wrong product. Number one. Number two, on Saturday afternoon, 3 representatives from the rail industry showed up and took pictures and left. It was up to us, with the Canadian counterparts in the incident command group, to determine that foam was the best applicable extinguishing agent, where to get the foam, and it virtually was the Canadians' incident command system that determined that the best approach was to get 8,000 gallons of foam from Toronto 7 hours away from the refinery. That wasn't the plan of the rail company, that was the plan of the incident command system. This clearly identified that there was a failed, it was failed in place. There was no preemptive plans to help us, to help Lac-Mégantic and them. And for the emergency management system, planning is the big piece of this. We need to enforce planning, because to wait for the 911 call to come in, it's way too late. And
you're there and you don't know what you're dealing with in that car?
Absolutely. And, you know, that particular day, and speaking to some of the firefighters in Lac-Mégantic, because them being there first, they told us the stories of how the oil ran down the street like hot lava, and they actually saw people step out of their homes and be vaporized in the oil. Saw tragic death instantly. We got to, therefore, through planning, preparation, preparedness, long before response, do whatever it takes in America to prevent this from ever happening anywhere in our communities.
So from your experience as a firefighter, is there a difference or something unique about fighting a crude oil fire versus some of the other types of fires that you face?
Absolutely, Madam Chairman. I think the biggest part is we are prepared for the residential, common, everyday emergencies. We're not prepared for a major disaster like this. And when we are, the FEMA regulation says that generally, you know, it takes 72 hours before FEMA could come in and support us in a major crisis. But we got to do something between that 72 hours and the first operational period that we're there, the 12 hours. Somewhere in between there, somebody's got to help support our programs and come in and be our back support and say to us, we're here to help you. We have all the answers to your questions. We can provide you this, this, and this. That didn't happen that day in Lac-Mégantic. It needs to be better preparation, better planning, better response by the oil and rail companies who ship this, and they need to be held responsible for that.
Thank you very much for your testimony.
Thank
Senator
you.
Collins.